So, what are you skeptical of and what do you believe in? Are your intuition, listening, and discernment skills keeping you safe? Or are they at the top level? Hello, this is Angelscapes, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. Join me in this episode to explore your soul's intuition and how it ties into your well being. You are responsible for your own happiness or unhappiness. But in this age of information, how do you know where to drop your anchor or when to pull it up?
Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
We're going to talk a little bit about discernment and not the kind of discernment that comes from, I'm going to think it through and I'm going to know what it is and I got to have all of the answers. I'm going to talk about discernment that comes from a soul level, from a level of grace, which takes a couple of minutes to grab hold when something goes by your face really fast and you have to make your mind up about it or you have to have an opinion about it. What do you do? Seriously, I want you to think about, what do you do? How do you process when somebody wants you to know something or somebody wants you to believe what they're saying? I was listening to a book. I listen to audiobooks more than I read them these days, but it's called The Wisdom of the Shamans, and it's written by Don Jose Ruiz. He's the brother of Don Miguel Ruiz, who's the author of the Four Agreements. And they're both Toltec practitioners, and I love to learn from them. Maybe someday I'll get to learn with them live, but in this particular book, Don Jose Ruiz talks about a sixth agreement or a sixth understanding. And he says, listen, but be skeptical. Don't believe, but listen. Don't believe the voices in your mind, but listen. Don't believe anyone else, but listen. Always be willing to listen and listen with skepticism. There's always an element of truth in everything that anyone says or anything that you believe, but it is your job to discern what parts are really true for you. And I have to say that has rung true for me as of late. And I wanted to kind of take a look at that because I'm one of the people that believes everything she's told. If somebody wants something from me or wants me to do something for them, I think through and think, what can I do to help them? Or I just kind of jump into the bandwagon before I've really looked at the bandwagon to see if it has flat tires or not. So why be skeptical of the voices in your mind? Why not trust it? Because the voices in your mind are coming from belief systems. They're coming from older agreements. They're coming from not grace, oftentimes. They're coming from logical or unlogical childlike thinking. The voices in our mind are often based in drama or perceptions, and we often have stories within ourselves, and these stories were created to kind of help us, are you a good girl today? Were you a good girl today? And the good girl that you were today was because that's what mom and dad needed. It wasn't what you needed as a good boy or a good girl. So they're used to kind of manipulate us, and sometimes good manipulation, sometimes bad manipulation. But the voices inside are things that were, as Ruiz says, they were domesticated. We're not always looking at what it really is because we've been taught to discern from a domesticated point of view. So in Government History 101, what I learned in high school was really key for me. This is the first time that it really came home to me. I was a good Catholic. I was a good kid. I was the oldest of 9 and had to be that good girl kind of thing. And I had an interesting teacher in this Government 101. I sophomore year of high school. he was government 102. But he told us that if it was a political party or a group of people with a specific agenda that wasn't popular, that group, in order to come into power, who wanted the power they didn't have, would divide the people it wanted to govern. And he said it was the true conquerings. He said this was true of conquering kingdoms. I'm trying to get this straight. Um, so when a group of people, whether they were majority or minority, um, had a certain belief process, they worked really hard to get people to believe in that belief process, as opposed to understanding what people needed and serving them that way. And I was a white gal in a 75% Black school, and he was a Black teacher. And he would come to us, white guys, white women, in the classroom and say, well, what do you believe and what do you know to be true? And he would list a certain number of things. And I'd say, well, that's it. Well, that's not it. That's it. And he says, well, because I'm in Detroit, he said, for a Black person in this Detroit city, and women and men were very different. A Black man could never do that. Or a woman would always have to be careful of this, could never expect this other thing to happen. So as I was going to a 75% Black school, and so I was 25% as a minority, I learned what it was like to have belief systems or live in a world that I wasn't accepted in. Because I learned it from my friends, and I learned it by observing them, and I also learned it from my own experience. And the belief structures that were around me constantly did not match the belief structures that I were raised in. So I didn't know what to believe sometimes, but I learned, as Jose Miguel says, I learned to listen with skepticism, with what is this really saying? What am I really learning here? What am I assuming that wasn't right? So back to this division of things, to divide people, they would start rumors and accusations, calling them names, falsely based, that would bring out fear and anxiety among the group. And they would go after each other, and they would divide and conquer. So sometimes group consciousness, there was another thing that later on I learned in political science in college, that the masses were not always the group that knew what was going on. The masses, they felt in this one particular class, were easily manipulated and moved around into believing a certain structure, so that they would either vote a certain way, or they would hate a certain way, or they'd be afraid of something, so they could never do such and such, even though such and such might be the best thing they could ever do for themselves. The Salem witch trials, we could go to another group mentality, as I have read in a history book, were fanned by a desire for a land grab. And the accused witches, sometimes they were women, occasionally a man, their land was taken away from them when they went in, and if they were found guilty, somebody else would own that land. So it was a land grab, this Salem witch trial. The scapegoats could have distracted the villagers while other things were happening behind the scenes. I don't think anyone caught on to that until historians did some study and read about what had happened, and where did the land go, and who got the land, and who started the problem. Oh, that was the person that got the land. I don't have the whole facts here, but I do know that that was a possibility in the Salem witch trials. And now in World War II and the Cold War have shown us historically that when the spirit and mind are turned through propaganda, the village, the country can be weakened and divided and even conquered. As we looked at World War II, that huge conquering thing that happened throughout Europe, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And there's a whole deep history around that, but people were making up their minds about what was true and what was happening to them, and they weren't really plugged into what was really going on. And that was not the age of information. We have too much information. We have a lot of information, and we can, sometimes you don't know what to do with it all. But in those times, they didn't have the freeness or the frequency of information. They mostly had propaganda, these villages, these countries, these people, these groups. And you had some people that figured out pretty quick what was going on, and they became the bad guys. They had to hide, and there's some many amazing stories about that time when people were very heroic in keeping their villagers alive. And the stories can go on, but they were divided and conquered. When a person tells a story and gets a few people to believe that story, does that make it the truth? When you are told a story and it scares you or it sways you, do you stop and consider the source or the intention behind the story? Do you know the intention or motivation of the person who is trying to influence you? You sit down and say, what do you mean by that? Or what's going on with that? Or do you use your sense of intuitiveness, your sense of discernment, your sense, what is my soul telling me about this? Or maybe you want to buy into that illusion. You want to be swayed because it's just easier to go along with the group, or because maybe it's going to give you something that you can say, I can sign up for that. It's going to give me this, that, and the other thing. May not be true, may not be holding the whole truth, but maybe you have a motivation for signing up for something. What is your motivation for believing a story, any story? Do you need to get along with a group? To not have to make up your own mind? Maybe sometimes it's like there's just so much information going on. You tell me what to do. You tell me how to think about it. You tell me what's real. I fall into that category lots of times. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. What do they mean? Well, then now that we have YouTube and we have the internet, I can go and very slowly listen to things to start to make up my mind more than before. I remember even in high school and even in my early 20s, listening to the news and going, where did that come from? What is this? And looking through the newspapers and then realizing I didn't have time to look for all of it because it was so complicated. Whether it was the economy or the politics or why the store down the street closed or why I grew up in Detroit and it was I grew up during the Detroit riots. I was kind of like just a few miles away from it. And I was very aware of what was going on, but I didn't completely understand it because being this color, I didn't get all the information. And later on, when I went to the high school, I got more information, and I was shocked. I was shocked out of my world and shocked into somebody else's world. Anyway, is it a fun adventure to believe somebody else? Maybe, that's going to go for a good ride. Let's go there. Do I want to belong to something? Do you want to belong to something? If you go along with them, if you believe, like the clique concept, like you see the bad girls or the bad boys in these different movies where they would go, let's go along. You're not quite the leader. You're not quite thinking on your own. It's like, but if I go along with this strong person maybe will protect me or I'll be umbrellaed under them. So maybe it's a protection thing. To belong to something is a deep human need. We're social beings. We survive through society. It's a drive. It's actually a drive for survival. And it's really important to realize and recognize that, because maybe that drive for survival is tricking you or is taking you down a road where you're hanging out with the wrong people, as mom and dad would say. So let me tell you a story. I read this story as an early reader. I was between 6 and 7 years old. So it was really my first kind of figuring out the words, figuring out what they meant. And it was a big deal when you're a young reader. I don't know if you can remember that. But as I went back into remembering about this story, I realized that I was trying to understand the concept of the story as much as getting the words right, getting the story down. So the story is called Millions and Millions and Millions of Cats. It's kind of like a poem story. It's very rhythmic. So this is a story about an elderly couple who live comfortably, but they realize that they are kind of lonely. And the wife says, if we had a cat, I could just love this cat. It was a beautiful cat. It'd be fuzzy and cute. And I could just hold a cat and it would make me feel less lonely. And probably husband would make you feel less lonely. And he agreed. He said, okay, I'm going to go look for a cat. So he traveled far, far away from his home and he journeyed through the hill and dale, and then he came upon a hillside that, lo and behold, had millions. It was covered with cats. There were hundreds of cats, thousands of cats, millions and millions and millions of cats, kittens everywhere. And he picked one up and he loved it. It was so beautiful. And then he looked over to his left and he found one that was even prettier, a pure white cat. And then he looked over to his right. Oh, there's a tuxedo cat. And I said, oh, what about the multicolored cat? What about that gray, elegant striped cat? And it just went on and on. Oh, about the black cat with the little bib on it? He's so cute. She's so cute. And he couldn't make up his mind. So he had such a hard time deciding that he said, come on with me, come on home with me. And for some reason, all the cats followed him. And wasn't thinking it through, in my opinion, but he took them down the hill, over the dales, into the whatever. And they stopped at, they were so thirsty, they stopped at a pond. They drank the whole pond out because it was cats. And then they got hungry, so they came to another hillside and they ate all the grass. I can't say grass, but that's a new one. Anyways, even I was skeptical as I thought, the cats always eat grass. But anyway, they ate all the grass on the hill. There was nothing left on the hill. So even then, the man didn't quite figure out what he was up for. And so he finally made it home with this big parade of cats. And his wife came out the door and looked at it, was just shocked. She goes, you can't have all these cats. What are you doing? What were you thinking about? We can't feed them all. And so he says, well, which one do we keep? And what do we do? And she says, you know what? Let's keep the prettiest one. Well, how do you pick? So she said, let's ask the cats to pick who's the prettiest cat. You can only imagine what happened. So the cat said, I'm the prettiest. No, the cat said, no, I'm the prettiest. It's like, how could you even argue? Well, I'm the most beautiful cat. And there's a big cat fight ensued. And it was so raucous and so violent that the man and his wife went in and shut the house and shut the door until everything quieted down. And when they came out of the door, now in my 7-year-old imagination or 6-year-old imagination, they came out and there was nothing there. And I just thought, there's a lot of cat guts hanging around. This is my first horror story ever. And they looked around and they said, well, now we have no cats, until they heard a little mewing in the bushes. And out came this really scrawny, kind of skinny, yucky cat. And they said, well, I guess if we fed it and if we took care of it, maybe this will be a beautiful cat. So they took the cat in and they fed it and they played with it and they washed it. And the cat, after a little while, a few days, maybe a few weeks, turned out to be a beautiful cat. And they said, well, this is the prettiest cat. I'm glad we had this cat. And that left me really confused as a kid. It kind of, my reaction was the poor cats. I would never live with that man and woman. I would never trust them. What were they doing? What did that man promise those cats, and that they would follow him all that way? And what is a cat's life not valuable? If they, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, they'll just kill each other till we have the right cat. What is that? And do you have to be pretty to be counted? And what does it mean or maybe it's bad to be pretty. Maybe you shouldn't be pretty at all. You should be just ugly and just wait for somebody to pick you out, just hide. And I thought, well, maybe the cat should have figured that problem out a little better. Like, for instance, why are we following this man? Or, oh, look, we got duped. Let's come together as a team. Or, I don't think I thought about that till much later. Are cats stupid? I was trying to understand, are cats that dumb? I mean, seriously. I was the oldest of 7 years old. I think my parents had 7 kids. I oldest of 7 at 7. So we had a pretty tight household. And there were also a lot of cats in the house, I guess you could say it. Not literally, but there were a lot of babies in the house. And I got to thinking, well, maybe there's too many of us. Maybe some of us have to go. I started to think like that. And because my mom and dad were overwhelmed and all this stuff. And I said, well, that kind of stopped in a hurry. But I had a lesson from that story that was an open-ended lesson. This story to me, as I think about it now, represents an allegory of an empty promise, lack of respect, There was need for security, scarcity, and there was a lot of selfishness. But who was selfish? The cats, the old man, the old woman, all of them. Um, when we are scared because we need what we need in life is scarce. This is a big story about scarcity. We turn on each other. I think that was the biggest take home for me with this story. When things are scarce, we turn on each other. We don't help each other. And I was wondering what that author had in mind when she wrote this children's book, for gosh sakes. And it's a very award-winning, well-renowned look. Find it if you want. Just don't tell him when I gave a bad review, but you can tell him I gave him a bad review. So stories like this teach us. And here was this story that was teaching me as a young reader. So let's tell another story. Let's talk about Harry Potter and the Dementors. There's so many things in Harry Potter, so many rich allegories, so many scary things. Well, Harry Potter was treated so mean, and on it went, and the kids didn't always come together to help each other, and the teachers were all at odds with each other. There were some really mean teachers. So anyway, there were these characters in Harry Potter, Dementors, and they're demonic creatures that feed on people's emotions and can even suck up their souls. They guard Azkaban, the high security prison for wizards. How they managed to tame these Dementors into doing that, I couldn't tell you. Some strong magic, I guess. But on the other hand, the fact that this character existed in Harry Potter, to me, was very telling. So these Dementors needed people to be in drama. They needed people to be in fear. They needed something to feed off of. They didn't feed off a happy, peaceful people. They fed off of fear. So let's talk about a sci-fi storyline that's pretty popular, about an alien race that comes to take over the planet. You see that in Star Trek, you could see that in Stargate, you could see that in the War of the Worlds. I can't even tell you how many movies there are about alien beings that want they're non-human, non-Earth based, that want to enslave humanity and own all of Earth's resources. This is not a new story. It's told over and over and over again, which makes me wonder, why is this story told over and over and over again? What are these stories teaching, these fictional stories? Because sometimes we can't talk about these issues, so we turn them into fictional things so we can bring them into the light. So in both scenarios, both of the Dementors or the bad aliens needed to conquer the people without destroying them. Humanity needed for them to be mostly intact, but miserable. The Dementors are hungry for pain and drama, and the aliens, on the other hand, were passive and defeated humans that they could control. So what was the best plan of action to make sure that for the bad guys? What's the best plan of action for the bad guys to make sure that they are always fed? That's right. Something that would make us fight and destroy each other without looking up, or without looking at the resources outside of ourselves. Just like the millions of cats, humans are really good at hurting each other. They're really good at buying into stories so that they jump on each other. We make it easy for fictional enemies to conquer us. Seriously, I think that's what the stories are. Repeated storyline is trying to tell us. We're making it really easy for people, for events, whether it's people, leadership, aliens, Dementors, demons, to come and feed off of us because we don't agree, we don't come together as one. And here's what Source says. Source and Spirit tell us we are responsible for our own happiness and well-being. There's a reason for this natural law. We need a sense of sovereignty. We need a sense of uniqueness and independence to create our own happiness and well-being. Happiness and health align us with the flow of life and the love that comes from Source. So when we're outside of Source, we're in scarcity. When we're inside of Source, let's talk about what happens. I'm going to repeat that. Source and Spirit tell us we are responsible for our own happiness and well-being. There is a reason for this natural law. We need a sense of sovereignty and individuality, uniqueness and independence to create our own happiness or well-being, to create heaven on earth. Happiness and health align us with the flow of light and love that comes from source. Sources, love and light and source and the creator are not bad aliens. They're actually where we come from, and where we need to learn to live is through love. The spiritual journey, and spiritualists teach us this, the old time spiritualists teach us that a path to compassion and well-being brings people together. Together, we can help each other as we build this well-being and happiness. A united humanity is harder. A united humanity is nearly impossible to conquer and enslave. In the fiction stories I mentioned, it is humanity that comes together. Now, think of the end of Harry Potter, think of the end of some of those crazy sci-fi movies. It is humanity that comes together to fight the bad guy, the evil guy. And even though they don't have the skills and the strength and the power that the bad guy, evil guys have, it is their love and compassion and their courage that conquers the bad guys. So that's another reason why I think these stories get repeated over and over again. So as we come together in our courage and our love and align ourselves with source, we are unstoppable. We are powerful. Humanity is at risk when we are divided. The planet and all of life on the planet is at risk when humans are out of balance and they're afraid and they're angry. And this is not fiction, guys. We are now at a tipping point. We now need to figure this out. And it starts with the individual. It starts with the integrity of the individual, with the love, with the uniqueness, with the willingness to create well-being, even though they're being told that there's scarcity, even though they're going against what they're being socialized to go for, or kind of pushed into it. We need to think on our own. And when we think on our own, it's not about isolating ourselves. It's about, now let's talk about this. It's about going back to source, going back to grace. And to do that, we need what we need. We need to be connected to our intuition, which connects us to our soul, which connects us to source. We need to be connected beyond our mind, our logical ego mind that has been trained since before we were born. We need to move to grace. That's not an easy thing to do. Early spiritualists showed us how women helping women made a difference. Now, back in the day, this is before Civil War, during Civil War, there's the abolition movement and the women's movement, and they were together. And the abolitionists sat down with the women's rights. I don't know if they call them suffragettes yet. It said, you know, they finally decided after many, many conferences and talks, it would be easier to free the slaves than it would be to give women their rights. That was a history book, and I was shocked. I was like, and yes, really. So it was the spiritualists who were on the side of both. It was a spiritualist who went into, I guess, Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Lincoln Todd, Mary Todd Lincoln, had a seances at her, they had lost their young son, and she liked to bring the spiritualists in to connect to their son. And Abraham sat with some of the sittings, and one of the women that went in, these were women, channeled for him. And a great spiritual being came forward and explained why slavery was bad, why this couldn't go on. It was against humanity, and whatever they said swayed Lincoln in a very powerful way, and helped tip the scales for him to make slavery illegal, which caused the Civil War, simplifying it. But in the meantime, the spiritualists understood and were a women's movement to support women, to when women were really down and out. Women couldn't really make money, they couldn't own property. And the best job that actually the best job back then, before it was illegal, was prostitution, because those women made the most money and had the most security, the ones who really learned how to do it well. Otherwise, you could be a laundress or a school teacher. None of those pay very much. Or you'd get married and you were a servant to your husband. You had no rights. Your husband had all the rights. Of course, that was back in the day where the law was you couldn't hit your wife anything bigger than a thumb, anything thicker than your thumb, get a stick. I don't know. It was a bad time back then for women, for a lot of people. And it was the spiritualists, along with the Quakers, along with the Shakers, along with many, many people who said, we have to do this differently. We have to move away from, and they were actually moving away from the Christian, there was a group of strong-willed Christians who were leading the government, who were saying, this is who we're going to vote for president, this is who we're going to bring in. And it was the spiritualists that challenged that regime or that power structure. And I can't imagine what it would have taken to think that differently, to think that far outside of the box for society, to say, I'm going against society. And the women hung together, the women helped each other. Let me talk to you a little bit about a concept called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a motivational theory in psychology that compromises a 5-tier model of human needs. And the 5 levels of the hierarchy, I can say that word, hierarchy, are physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging needs, esteem needs, I'm valuable, I'm unique, I'm worthwhile, and self-actualization needs, I have uniqueness, I have a vision, I have thoughts. Physiological needs would be a roof over your head, enough to eat. Safety needs would be, nobody's going to come and burn down my house every other week. I'm not going to be taken off to prison, and love and belonging needs that really felt into esteem needs. These are all things that people do well with and need to thrive. And at the lowest level, if these needs aren't met, it is impossible to become self-actualized. And so in the growth of humanity, that we're at a tipping point that we need to really work forward to, we need to understand that our community needs to address this hierarchy of needs for everyone, so that everyone can thrive and move forward. I ain't gonna call me names in a minute, I don't care. But when we have a society around us, whether it's, I don't care what part of the world it is, that says you're not valuable, you're not worth it, you're less than, no matter if it's down the street or if it's in your church or if it's in another very disparate part of the world where women don't have rights or certain color people don't have rights, we can't thrive. And if somebody is not thriving in one part of the world, we're missing out, because we're at a tipping point, guys, we really are. So when you don't know where to go, or your anger and fear are driving you, go to grace. Suspend your decisions until you have connected to source, spirit, and receive the guidance from your soul and source, and act on that. Not the guidance from fear and scarcity. Take care of yourself. Make sure that you have done all that you can to feed yourself, put yourself into a good environment, and then use your creativity to move forward, to get the grace, to act on the grace from God. The grace from God is always there, whether you're hungry, whether you're homeless, it's always there. But the ability to act on that grace is, bring yourself up to be able to act on that grace. And sometimes if you don't have esteem in your life, or sometimes if you have an abusive situation, or you have a situation that's very demeaning, constantly demeaning, you lose sight of yourself too. You lose sight of your uniqueness and your individual self. Sometimes you gotta fight for that. I say, no, I'm not buying into that. I'm not listening to that. I'm not taking that. So you're in a position to act on that grace of the guidance that comes from grace, that comes from the inspiration from source, um, that moves you forward. Your inner voice may be based in fear and scarcity. So maybe you don't want to listen to that inner voice. Go to the grace until you know for certain that you're acting from your higher self for the highest and best. And this is what's going to change the tipping point, is to go from that scarcity thinking, that fear thinking, and find your pathway to grace, find your pathway to source, find your pathway to that flow of source. It's there for you. It's there for every minute and every breath that you take. But you gotta put down the fears, you gotta put down the old beliefs, you gotta put down the old teachings and find it by listening to your heart. There's a lot of heartfelt movies out these days as well. To learn, and I talk about this all the time on webinars and with my clients, is learn what soul language is and how you can recognize your higher self and hear your guides in spirit and get their eagle eye point of view, and then carry on from there, from that place, and make excuses saying, well, it's because of this happened and this because of that, and I can never do that. That is a lie, and that's the demons talking to you, if you want to put it that way. And they're the ones that need for you to be despairing and arguing with one another, and they're not helping. So that dark place within yourself, accept it, love it, and find your higher self and bring it into that higher self and say, we got a problem here, guys. What are we going to do? Change the story from division and despair to connection and compassion, to all those sharing this planet with you. I'm not just talking about people, I'm talking about animals and plants and the earth itself. We're all in this together. When I talk about humanity, when spiritualism talks about humanity, we're talking about all the things that come together to support life on this planet. So we don't want to leave any of those out. We happen to function at a different level. I tell you what, you watch the miraculous fungus movie and see what vibration they're very, the intelligence that they're working on, the level that they're working on, and see how they work together, just those plants, as fungus and mushrooms and everything. Maybe you could learn what living in grace is, what living in the flow of source is, so that we can begin to, again, I said, create the kingdom of God on earth. Or what's another way to put it? Create grace in all that you do and all that you say, so the highest creativity and your highest best is served. And when you serve your highest best from source, everyone is served, everyone thrives, everyone does well. So when you're seeing your community and they're all suffering and they're all not doing well, something's wrong. There's something outside thought that's coming in to manipulate and to scare you and to push you into a process, a thought process or decision-making process that isn't good for you and it's not good for humanity. So I want to put you on a challenge here. I want you to put on notice that, take a look at your life and ask yourself, what's influencing me right now? What do I believe? What am I listening to? And where is grace? Where is God in all this? And you can say, well, God isn't here anymore. Well, that's because you're not listening. That's because you have lost that connection. And if you've lost that connection, I'm here. This is what I do. I teach people to listen to the language of their souls. I love giving readings, but I mostly love empowering people to listen to their souls so that they can know where source is, where God is. It's real easy to say, there's no God or there's no source or there's nothing is supporting me, because there's an outside force telling you that there isn't, and it's a lie. It's not true. Do we need to go this alone? Well, we do need to take action, and we do need to take motivation, and we do need to take steps, and sometimes it feels like alone, but if we are working with source, if we were working with that higher power, we don't feel like we're so alone. And if we have a team around us, we're not alone. So reach out and get your buddies that also want to live from source and create not to control each other, but to create a place that each individual person is plugged into source, not plugged into somebody else's idea, but plugged into source, because then you all work together and create the bigger picture. And when we're each whole coming together, we 1 + 1 = 4. 1 + 1 = 6. 1 + 1 + 1 will equal 12, because we're bringing in more than just ourselves, or we're bringing in our power, our soul power. So I want to encourage you. If you have any questions, you can, or you want to talk to me more about what I do, you can contact me at angelscapes.net. And if you were interested in what I do and if I can help you, get a discovery session. Go to angelscapes.net, book a session, go to discovery session, and book some 20 minutes with me and we'll talk. I am in this to bring humanity to another place. I'm in this to witness. I don't know. I'm in this to have source and joy and love be part of everyone's life, not just some people's lives. So with all that, I give you my blessings. I give you my attention and my love, and I'm asking Source to intervene with you and your highest guidance to be your strongest. So for now, stay safe, be curious, be kind, and find out what's going on, guys. What's motivating you, and where's the love? Where's the good stuff? So peace out. That's all for now, and see you later.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.